Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Lancaster Social Equity Commission to order.
Commissioners Carter. Here. Davis. Here. Deloche. Here. Hone. Absent. Joseph. Absent. Vice Chair Kristen Pope.
Here.
Chairman Cannon.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Would anyone like to give an invocation today?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
If you could all bow your heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, or whoever you consider the Most High, I just thank you so much for bringing all of us here together today. I know that our community and our nation are faced with some arduous challenges ahead of us, but I pray that you help us put all of our collective power together to help us solve all of these problems and challenges that we face. We know that there are challenges surrounding families, that so many in our community have many questions about. So please help them gain transparency with how these systems operate and how we can best move our community forward for everyone. I pray that you give us a sense of unity, a sense of peace, and a sense of togetherness as we embark on this new season for both our city and for our country. In our Father's name I pray. Amen.
Amen. If everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Face the flag and repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I believe we have a presentation from the DCFS. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
First, my name is Frank Ramos. I'm a Deputy Director with DCFS Service Bureau 3, which encompasses the Lancaster and Palmdale office.
I'm going to ask you to get closer to the mic.
I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Frank Ramos, Deputy Director with DCFS. I'm over the Lancaster and Palmdale offices, and I'm here with Assistant Regional Administrator Zellery Woods. And in the audience is Lisa Whitecrow, who's the Regional Administrator or Office Head over at the Lancaster office. Wanted to, first of all, thank the Commission. Commissioners, thank you for allowing us to be here this evening, as well as wanted to thank the staff and welcome any audience members who may have some questions once we're done. I wanted to share that we're really excited to be here, and I'll share why. I met with the Public Safety Director, Lancaster City, Rod, and we were talking about DCFS and other systems that people don't understand. You see things on the news, things happen, and people don't get to see the intricacies behind what may be on TV. We at the Lancaster office, as well as Palmdale, have been working really, really hard during the last few years to try and really work better together with our community. And that's defined as government, service providers, faith-based, and families with lived experience. And so what we wanted to do today was come and show you and speak to you about our efforts at trying to positively impact African American and Black families. As everyone knows here, there is disproportionality in every single system. It's quite clear. What we're hoping is that we can share a little bit about what we do, maybe get some feedback and advice, and quite honestly ask this commission if there's anything that we can do in collaboration to help our families in our community. We're genuine in what we're doing here today. No one said, you need to go. We said we want to come. So with that, if you don't mind, I am going to get started. I've got a paper copy here that I added a couple notes. And may I get started, or do you have any questions before we begin?
Please go ahead.
Great, thank you. So this is our theme, Know Better, Do Better, Improving Outcomes for African American, Black Families, and Child Welfare. May I get to the, I apologize. I'll do that. I'm the Deputy Director. As I indicated earlier, I'm over both Lancaster and Palmdale. My office is actually in Palmdale. It was in Lancaster. We were moved to another office because of space. Lisa White Crow is a regional administrator who's here just to add some moral support, but also to answer any questions in case they come up where she can lend her expertise. And of course, I'm here with my subject matter expert as well, Ellery Woods, Assistant Regional Administrator. Next slide, please. So what we want to talk about is we're going to go over some data which drives some of the work that we do at the Lancaster office. It's really good to share stories, things that our social work staff have done in collaboration with the community, but we want to be fully transparent and say this is what is going on in the community, and this is what we're doing to try and positively impact outcomes for children and families. Go to the next slide, please. So the Lancaster office services actually 6 zip codes: Elizabeth Air Force Base, Elizabeth Lake, Lake Hughes, High Vista, Lancaster, Quartz Hills, and Lebec. So the data that we're going to talk about really encompasses all 6 zip codes. It's our catchment area. Next slide, please. So I want to share a little bit. Yes, sir.
Ms. Ramos,
Yes.
you have all the time you want. Can you slow down just a little bit?
Will do.
Thank you.
Will do. Wouldn't be the first time I've been asked to do that. So the Lancaster office, I want to talk a little bit about what the organization looks like. We have one regional administrator who is the office head, and that's Lisa in the back. I'm the deputy director. I'm over that operation as well as the Palmdale operation. We have 7 assistant regional administrators. Of course, Ms. Woods is one of them. We have 2 children's services administrators. They help with a lot of the day-to-day. They help support the operation, and they're part of our management team as well. We also have 37 SCSWs, known as supervising children's social workers. Each supervisor oversees a very specific function of social workers. ER, emergency response, that's the first knock. So when a reporter calls into the hotline an allegation of child abuse or neglect, the emergency response social worker is the one that will go out and knock on the door. So they're the ones that assess the allegations. We have 23 continuing services units. And by the way, I apologize. 8 emergency response means we have 8 units or 8 groups of social workers who are all overseen by one supervisor. We have 23 continuing services units, and these staff, their primary responsibility is to visit families where there's already an open case, meaning there's an open court case or a VFM, which is a voluntary family maintenance. So VFMs are cases where the children remain at home, but there is no court case. However, there's an agreement with the family that they need some kind of support. And I want to define support. It used to be that our organization, and other organizations, and it still happens to some degree, they go to Family's Home and they say, we know what you need. So a few years ago, continuum of care reform changed that for DCFS. What we do is we have what's known as child and family team meetings. These are meetings where the family has the opportunity to share their story, why they're here, some of their stressors, and what they think they need versus what we, wearing the tie and the badge, think they need. And that's been a huge change during the last few years. As we all know, culture and practice takes time. So it's an ongoing effort. We are by no means going to say we've got this. We don't. We don't. And again, that's one of the reasons we're here today, to ask this commission if you have any ideas or if there's anything we can do in collaboration to continue to help our children and families. So the continuing services units, as indicated, it can be a voluntary case, but it can also be a court case. And we have a lot of cases that are open. And a continuing services case can be where a child is with one parent but not the other. A child is or children are placed with relatives or non-related extended family members, which can also be referred to as foster parents. We refer to them now more as resource parents. So those are the type of families that continuing services staff work with. We also have 3 units of dependency investigators. Their primary job is to receive, this is for open court cases. They receive the allegation. It could say, for example, on 2/2/22, Father Frank Ramos physically abused his child, John, by grabbing a whip, hitting him on the legs, punching him in the nose, etc. The dependency investigator's role is to talk to family, collateral contacts, the alleged victim, and to try to decipher whether or not the abuse may or may not have occurred. and then they write a court report, they make a recommendation that goes to the court, and then the hearing officer or judge decides whether it was true or not and what's next. Wasn't true, didn't happen, give that child back to mom and dad, dismiss the case, or we have a concern for the safety of the child, and we believe that the order that was made prior, which could have been to remove from a parent or not, shall remain. A lot of options there. We also have 2 coach developers. So these are not units. These are 2 actual supervisors who have been specially trained on the child and family team process. In other words, how do you take away that implicit bias lens, set it aside? How do you learn to better listen to the family? How do you learn not to step on toes, so to speak, because the family is the expert? We're not the experts, the family is. And then how do we gracefully listen to families so that if they want to bring in a neighbor or a barber to be a part of their supports, how do we make it so they feel comfortable enough to bring them on board so that they have a larger support network for their family? So those coach developers, their job is to help us run the child and family team meetings, to meet with our staff, to train some of our staff, so that we can do better by our families. And as stated earlier, and I'll say it a few more times, we aren't there yet. All systems have issues, and our job and our charge, quite honestly, is to do better by our families. So that's that with respect to coach developers. We have 189 children's social workers, so they're all mixed in between emergency response, continuous services, and dependency investigations. Next slide, please. So we have some specialized units. We have the ERDD unit, Eliminating Racial Disproportionality and Disparity. Those units are comprised of staff that have taken the extra step that we believe are champions to help eradicate disproportionality, disparity, and to really lead the charge for the office and for our office community. We also have a family preservation unit and drug court. The family preservation unit is just what it sounds like. It helps preserve the family. These are for cases, these are for families whereby a child or children are in the home, and we reach out to our prevention aftercare service providers, and they work with the family. So while we visit monthly, it's really our service providers that are going out there, whether it's once a week, every other week, or once a month, to help provide support, guidance, in certain circumstances, some mentorship to our families. The drug court, these are forgive me when I say cases, I mean families, but all the jargon, and that's part of the problem, right? It's jargon. All the jargon speaks to cases, and what I mean is families. We have families that are assigned to drug court. It's voluntary. It's a family or a parent saying, I do have challenges with substance use, and I am willing to attend drug court. What drug court does is it provides hearings that are more frequent. It checks in with the parent more frequently, and it basically is a partnership with the parent because, again, it's voluntary for the parent to go to that type of court. We also have our transitional eighth youth unit, and these are units that work with our non-minor dependents, 18-year-old plus. So these are staff that we have whose passion is to work with the older youth population to help them have at least one person that will love them and help them as they get older, and to help them navigate the system, because when I was 18, 19, 20, there's no way that I was going to be able to be out there on my own. So that job is one whereby we are there to help, not hold hands, but to listen to the non-minor dependent and to help connect them to services and any other needs that they may have.
Mr. Ramos, I keep seeing the word unit. How many bodies are in a unit?
A unit comprises of between 6 to 8, well, it's changed. Five to six social workers. What's happened over time, and thank you for asking, Commissioner, what's happened is the work of a children's social worker has doubled or tripled during the last 10 years. It's very, very challenging for a children's social worker to be able to provide every single support to make sure that they cover everything that is required by, a lot of it by law. We've negotiated with the union a lower span of control so the supervisor can have a better oversight over the staff.
Which union?
I apologize.
Which union?
SEIU 721?
Awesome, thank you.
Yes, and I think it's local 723 for social workers and 777 for supervisors. David Green is the president of SEIU, and he is a social worker, a children's social worker, so he understands the challenges that children's social workers have and historically has worked very well with us because he wears that hat as well. The Voluntary Family Maintenance Unit, that's a unit of, those are social workers that work with families who are not in the court systems. So at any time, a family can say, thank you for your help, but I don't really want any more help, and I appreciate it, but have a nice day. So this is not a court case. It's very, very different. We also have 2 joint response social workers. Those are 2 social workers who, when called upon by law enforcement, will accompany law enforcement on responses. It's been very challenging because many of the agencies in the Antelope Valley, as you probably know, they have a lot of, for example, Sheriff, they have a lot of calls. DCFS, Antelope Valley, they get a lot of child abuse calls. So there are times when the joint response social workers actually do not accompany law enforcement. We're very proud of the following. We actually have 4 school-based social workers. We implemented this program about a year and a half ago, and the intent was and continues to be to have a liaison of sorts at the schools so counselors can go up and say, for example, Frank came to school and he was dirty. Do I need to call the hotline? No. You do not call the hotline because somebody has poverty-related challenges. But what we can do is we can provide some services, local agencies that maybe can help with some clothing, food banks, et cetera. And so we're really proud because we worked really hard with the union for them to say yes, because they wanted more staff. And so over time we have acquired more staff, but negotiations can be quite tricky sometimes. So we're really proud of our progress there. We also have 19 human services aides. These are some of the backbone staff of our department. They are a liaison to the social worker. Their role includes monitoring visits between a parent and a child, accompanying a social worker to visit a family whereby, for example, you have father who's also visiting, but he needs to speak to the social worker, and the human services aide has the opportunity then to engage the child so that father can speak to the social worker alone. As you know, we don't want to expose children to some of the worries that parents have, because especially at a young age, it can definitely leave a traumatizing impact. And then we have 40 clerical staff. These are the other backbone to our organization. They scan our documents, they answer phones, they email us constantly with respect to what's happening in the office and what the needs are. So if I were to call Lisa and she wasn't there and somebody, one of our staff answered, they would get a hold of her. Although Lisa's pretty good, she will always answer. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to hand off to Ms. Woods in a moment, but I wanted to ask the Commission at this point if you have any questions that I could clarify before we transition over.
Yes. Anybody before I go?
So, my first question is, you said you had 23 groups that verify kids at home, but they say they need support. Is that what you said? Is that an
Yes.
individual people or 25 groups?
These are 23 actual 23 units. So thank you, 23 groups.
Okay.
And they average 5 to 6 social workers within each group.
Okay, great. And the other question I had was the difference between family preservation and a voluntary family unit.
That's a great question. So a voluntary family maintenance unit is a unit where the social workers oversee families that have the children in the home. Family preservation, they work specifically with agents. By the way, it can be a combination. They work with family preservation agencies such as Valley Oasis and others, and they may go out and visit the families independent of a children's social worker. And so a family preservation, an opportunity to receive family preservation services is voluntary. The parent has to say, I'm comfortable with it, and yes, they can come to my home.
I just had one other question.
Sure.
You mentioned about investigators going out to talk to the family and the victim, and at some point, if you find out that the report was not true, you give the child back.
It's not that simplistic, but that is what, in essence, what I said. So there are multiple opportunities for that to happen. When and I'll get to the dependency investigator in a moment. When there's the first knock at the door, when a child abuse referral has been generated, and by the way, the Child Protection Hotline, they follow the WIC 300 codes. So if the caller says certain things, such as a child is 8, the child has bruises, the child said, Mom or Dad hit me today, yesterday, the day before, by law, they have to look at some of these factors, and then they make the determination if a child abuse referral is generated. So an emergency response social worker will go to the home or where the child is. Sometimes the child is at the school, and they will interview the alleged victim, the child. They will interview the parents separately, and they will interview and look for any witnesses. And so the emergency response social worker at first knock actually has the opportunity to say this is unfounded. It didn't happen. Or it happened. It was not as severe as it was reported via phone, and we've mitigated safety. Safety is what we're all about. A child needs to be safe, and that's why we get involved, to try and mitigate safety whenever possible. So what can happen is we also can develop safety plans so that the child remains safely in the home. So it could be inconclusive, unfounded, or substantiated. Generally, when it's unfounded, we close the referral and there is no open case. When it's inconclusive, it really depends on what happened. That may be a scenario whereby it leads to a voluntary family maintenance, where a family member says, look, I didn't abuse my child, but yeah, I'm stressed. I am stressed, and I could use some support. There are some teaching and parent, what are they called? Teaching and parenting?
Teaching and demonstration.
Thank you, yes. There are staff that work for the family preservation agencies whose role is teaching and demonstrating. So basically, it's not a coach per se, but someone there that can say, look, Frank, next time you get really stressed out, why don't you do what we talked about last week and just go for a walk? So there's an opportunity at the initial stage to close the referral and walk away, close the referral and provide services if the parent agrees, or to file the allegations formally in court, and then the dependency investigator will be involved. And that's the person that when there's a court hearing, there will be a petition that provides allegations. And the allegations are generally worded based on state law. So what I've seen over time is, and I'll use myself as an example, on 5/5/22, Father Frank Ramos was under the influence of methamphetamines while in the presence of the child. Frank Ramos fell down, hit the child by accident. Actually, probably won't say accident because that's the dependency investigator's role to take a look at that, and the child was injured. So that's one example. The dependency investigator will then take all of the information that he or she acquired, and sometimes it's law enforcement. For physical and sexual abuse, law enforcement is involved. So there will be law enforcement reports that we look at, and we talk to the neighbors, family. If the child is going to school, we will talk to the school personnel. If the child's in daycare, we will make an effort to talk to the daycare person. And that's because they know the children as well. We don't know the family. So then the dependency investigator makes a recommendation to the hearing officer, to the court. At that point, each child has an attorney appointed, the parent has an attorney appointed, and the department, DCFS, has an attorney. We call them county counsel. And so then the hearing officer will look at the report. If the child's attorney let's say the dependency investigator said, yes, something happened, we should not return the child to Frank. The child's attorney also gets that report and can say, Your Honor, I disagree. I think the child should go home. And the parent's attorney has the same opportunity as well. And what they do is sometimes too is they will set the matter for trial. They will contest the recommendation, and that's when people may need to testify. I don't, maybe Zellery can share some light, but I don't think we get a lot of actual trials. I don't know. We have a lot of contested hearings, and then at the end of the day, people don't testify as often because attorneys back off and say, okay, I've spoken to my client, and something did occur, but we don't want the child to continue to be removed. We want the child to go home. We want family preservation in place. And by the way, Frank's cousin, who has been live scanned and has no criminal history, Your Honor, would be more than happy to be there during the day just to engage Frank and the child, and will be an extra set of eyes to help protect the child.
Thank you. I think the thing that concerns me is that if a child makes a report and then you see that, or you feel that it's unfounded and you leave, I've seen firsthand children devastated because they thought you were going to be helped and then you leave. For whatever reason, it looks like it's okay. I would love to see if you had an opportunity to maybe do any follow-up, even when you get that first call, if there's any way that can happen. Because I've seen firsthand the child calls and maybe they didn't show a bruise. Maybe you didn't see a bruise, but there's an issue there.
Right.
And so when you leave, they're all alone.
That is such a great point that you make. It's very, the age of the child matters as well, because the older the child, generally the more verbal the child is, and he or she can better describe what transpired. But you're right, there obviously are times when a child or youth will recant. And government does not want to be in anybody's house. We want to assess, and we want the child to be safe, and we want to walk away. I don't want the government coming into my house. I don't want a social worker coming in and saying, I'm going to visit you every month. But we also have legal mandates. If, based on what we've acquired, information that we've acquired, there isn't sufficient evidence, then we don't have the legal authority to go back in. Excellent questions. Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions?
Yes, sir, I had a question. So first question, with the emergency responders units, you said about 5. So is that about 40 staff members on emergency response? Do you guys feel like that's enough to handle the Antelope Valley?
The quick answer is no. The quick answer is no. We average, I think, is it 300 to 500 referrals a month? I may be off by a couple hundred, but no, sir. We are always in need of more social workers. I will add this. We are working with 5th District, with Monica Bankin, the Children's Deputy, Supervisor Barger's Children's Deputy, on succession planning, on cultivating talent from the AV and keeping it in the AV. We've actually been having AV stakeholders meetings approximately every quarter for the last 3 years. I was appointed Deputy Director in August, I believe, of 2019. I'm the only Deputy Director in LA County, DCFS, that actually has his office up in the AV. And that's because, as you all know, we've had high-profile child fatalities, but moreover, there are multi-generational challenges up in the AV, and it's 70 miles from downtown LA. So there are a lot of wonderful resources in the Antelope Valley, but we have a lot of people in various agencies, inclusive of school officials, who start their tenure in the Antelope Valley and then sort of make their way somewhere else. And so what we're trying to do is, and we've actually gone to Cal State Bakersfield, AV College, and we've done presentations at the schools to say, we have a job, this is what it is, and please, let's work together so that when you graduate, we're able to hire you. So, no, to answer your question, Commissioner, no.
Thank you. So the other question is, do you have capacity to hire more if you were to get said candidates? Do you have the openings for them?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
And that's sort of a catch-22 because I'd love to say we do not, but we have vacant social work items right now meaning we could hire somebody and place them on that item, and they are permanent employees. And I think the job of a children's social worker is extremely, extremely challenging. And there are staff who come to our office, they start their tenure, they want to help families, but there, as I stated earlier, the duties and responsibilities of a children's social worker has doubled or tripled during the last 10 years. And so it takes a special person who actually has above and beyond time to devote the hours necessary to really effectively support children and families.
And the last piece is, I was just wondering if the emergency responders are the only ones who go out to, and I'm just going to say schools, is there a sliding scale or a sliding scale of responsibility to where other people who are trained can go out and try to handle some of the overflow? And I want to tell you why I asked the question. As a high school administrator, my school closes at 6 o'clock, which is very late. Most high schools close at 2:20. But in the past 3 weeks, I've had 2 calls to DCFS where they needed to come, not only take statements, but pick up a student. And we literally, they got there at like 6:45 and the other one about 8 o'clock. So myself and a staff member, security guard, has to stay there with them. So I can imagine what that looks like if a person got off at 2. And the impact for me, not just, me getting home late, I don't care, but it's the student who's waiting on this other boot to drop. They're not going home, they don't know who this person is, and it's 7 o'clock. And so to me, that impact is huge to a little heart who's waiting on somebody to come pick them up and take them somewhere tonight.
Exactly.
So-
I do want to qualify one of my statements. We actually do respond to all of our child abuse referrals. However, you really need to have a manageable caseload, if you will, because I will go out there, and when I was a social worker, it's been a long time, 29 years, but when I went out there, I had a laundry list of items, questions that I needed before I could say, okay, now I will call my supervisor, consult with my supervisor, and he or she will help with the final determination as to what we need to do next. That laundry list has gotten much, much longer. What I will say is this. Chances are that the staff that responded at 7 or 8 o'clock or 6:45 were from our emergency response command post. Because what happens is, and here's part of the challenge, when a call is made to the child abuse hotline, they have to screen the caller by asking specific questions, because by law, we can't generate a response or a referral if there isn't sufficient information that puts a child at risk and puts a child, at risk of harm. And so what happens is the Child Protection Hotline will speak to the caller, will ask specific questions, then they have to process the information. There's a structured decision-making tool at the hotline that is utilized. It's a decision tree, if you will. And so their role is to check that to make sure that we are complying with the law. And then they will type it all in and generate a referral. If that referral is generated after 5 p.m., then it will be assigned to a social worker that doesn't come out of Lancaster or the Palmdale office. It will be what we call an after-hours social worker. I used to be the division chief over that program. But what I will say is I will give all of you my business card. If you have challenges, I've been around a long time with DCFS. I will do what I can to make some calls so that I can check in and help expedite some of those responses.
Thank you, sir.
Certainly.
Yes, thank you so much. So I know that we still have other aspects of the presentation to go, so I will try to be quick with this. So firstly, you were talking about your coach developers at the start of the presentation. And so we know, as you said earlier, that there's cultural change that is needed in the way that we respond to certain situations. So might I ask, what are some of the trainings that your coach developers have received in terms of cultural sensitivity and just cultural change. Like, what sorts of trainings have they went through, for example, diversity, equity, inclusion, making sure that we're not punitive towards minority folks, the list goes on and on.
That's a great question, and I'm going to ask Zellery after I speak to add to that. What we've done is we've created, and we're actually going to talk about this, we've created an Eliminating Racial Disparity and Disproportionality unit. We have a couple of units that, and I'm sorry, Zellery, I'm taking some of your presentation. The makeup of that unit includes social work staff, a cultural broker, someone from the community who, with lived experience in the community, not necessarily within our system, and a coach developer who has been trained on implicit bias, cultural sensitivity, as well as, for lack of a better term, leaving your ego at the door, your personal experience. And so those ERDD, Alan Michael Graves is also there at times. He's one of our coaches who teaches at our academy as well. We've had Kimala Lewis, who's one of our coach developers as well from DCFS. So that forum is all about cultural sensitivity. And by the way, with all due respect to our social workers, sometimes they're put a little bit on the spot because we all bring something to our work, whether we see it or not. That's why it's called implicit bias. And so the coach developer is trained to respectfully call out things that are not okay. For example, I went over to visit mom and dad. Dad was all pissed off at me. He was yelling at me. He is hostile. No. He cares about his family. He doesn't understand why you're there because maybe you didn't explain why. And so we have those kind of conversations. Lisa Whitecrow, the RA, as well as Zellery, we've gone through some very specific, detailed trainings over the last few years that talk about culture. And by the way, it's not just culture with respect to the relationship to our families, but it's culture within our office, because there can be some misunderstandings even within our operation, as I'm sure happens in all organizations. And I'll give you an example. LA County has 52, 56, maybe 58% Latinos, 20 some odd percent African American blacks, black families, black children. And so someone might say, well, why are you spending your efforts on impacting African American black families? Why? Because when we impact them in a positive way, we impact everybody else in a positive way. And because we know that black and African American families are the least, exactly, in every system, in every single system, which is why we're here, because we want to show you what we're doing and ask for any advice, guidance, any other agencies you may work with that we can collaborate with. And by the way, we do collaborate with a lot, but we can always collaborate with more.
Thank you so much. Did you want to go ahead?
Before we get to you, Ms. Woods, I have a few more questions for Mr. Ramos. I apologize.
Oh, no, please. This is why we're here.
So,
Thank you.
first of all, I just want to say that I agree with you that DCFS gets a bad rap. A lot of stuff that we see in the news isn't really representative of what actually goes on in the system, which is true for every system, which is true for the Sheriff's Department, which is true for the City of Lancaster. But what is also true is that perception for most people is reality.
Right.
A perception that the community has is a reality, and it needs to be addressed, and I appreciate you in the office for addressing those perceptions. And so I just want to clarify, are you the deputy director for just the Lancaster office, or is it both?
Lancaster and
Palmdale?
Yes. I supervise both offices, yes.
Okay, so what my concern is that another disparity, that what you guys are doing, and I'm sure that there's some sort of uniformity between offices all across the country, all across the county, and all across other offices. And one of my concerns is that what does the partnership look like? What does the information and resource sharing look like? Is there a policy for information and resource sharing between the other offices in SPA 1 or in this part of the county?
I wish I would have brought Robin. So Robin Younger Holmes is the regional administrator over Palmdale. We were just in a meeting with Robin. I said, Robin, we're going to the City of Lancaster. We'll see you later. Robin and Lisa, both Palmdale and Lancaster, have probably 90% to 95% the same initiatives, the same lens. And Robin started with Reggie Carter, who's now an acting deputy director from DCFS, the Father Strong Initiative for LA County.
Yes.
And so we actually, Robin is a champion, and if she was here, she'd be like, step aside, Frank, let me share with them what we're doing. The ERDD component I spoke of, cultural brokers, Alan Michael Graves teaching us what what we should be doing and what we need to continue to focus on, as well as the way that we treat our community families. It's a mirror image between the Lancaster and Palmdale offices. Because I supervise both, we just had a meeting from 1:30 until 3:30-ish with Robin and Lisa that I lead, and we talk about ERDD, and we talk about cultural humility. Right. And so we are, I wish she was here because then I'd have her speak.
I think I need to clarify. I understand that.
Okay.
I see the mirror images between. So when I was talking about that, I was talking about both Palmdale and Lancaster offices. I'm asking, what is the information sharing? What does that look like with other offices in this area of the county? I'm talking about Santa Cruz. I'm talking about places like Sylmar. I'm talking about the significant population of children in this system, right, where their families live here, or they live here, they go to school here, right, they're in a group home here, but their cases are out of Sylmar, right, Santa Cruz, Los Angeles, Compton, wherever, somewhere else. And so they're dealing with a whole nother office and a whole nother set of resources. Right. And so you talked about how many HSAs you have. I'm sure that the number is probably similar, if not less, somewhere else. What does that look like, and how are we addressing that for those kids that are out here? Because I honestly don't believe that if it's in another office, that it's not our problem. If they're in our city, it's our problem. So right. So what does that look like with helping out those children and those families that are in the system in this community, but their case is in another office? Exactly.
That's a great question. There are three other deputy directors that encompass the remaining offices. Mm-hmm. And so while I don't oversee them, and by the way, this is a great talking point for me with them when I meet with them weekly. While I don't oversee those operations, I can tell you that we have the Office of Equity. We hired a manager for the Office of Equity, Mario Johnson, and he left a few months ago. I'm not sure if any of you know Angela Parks Piles, but she and her team, they oversee our faith-based initiative with Dominique Robinson. This is department-wide, so county-wide. She's also either chairs or used to co-chair our centralized eliminating racial disparity and disproportionality meetings, and we have representation from all of the offices there, as well as the Children's Law Center, the child's attorneys. Phyllis, and I forget her last name, but thank you, Phyllis Strickland from Children's Law Center. So what I can say, sir, is I don't have enough detail to share with you this is what's happening in this office and that office, but there are common themes across every single office, and that includes father initiatives, ERDD, cultural brokers, and working with our prevention and aftercare service providers from a cultural lens.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I've been to some of those Father Strong meetings and stuff like that. They're amazing. They're great. But one thing that I noticed is that we've got black families, black fathers that are living in Illinois, that are living in Texas and Oklahoma, and their children are stuck out here, or they're living out here, and their children are their cases out of this area and this area. So I appreciate that, and we look forward to seeing how we can help kind of facilitate that between the different offices. So my other question would be, so what we do see in the news is tragedies, atrocities, right, things that go completely and horribly wrong. What we don't see in the news is how things go completely right and how children are saved and they're placed in good homes. And sometimes what we don't talk about, whether it be in public or in private or internally or in our community groups, what we don't talk about is what is the impact on the county? What is the impact on the community from the county when it comes to separating children and separating families? And what does that look like? And what are you guys doing to address that? And I'll be a little bit more specific. What are we doing to address the fact that all of these cases are coming out with mistreatment of Tay youth by the department, whether it be in the past or in the present? how are you guys addressing the mistreatment of youth in group homes? We just had to shut down several different camps in this part of the county because of the mistreatment that were happening to children. And back then, these were kids that were probably between the ages of 13 and 16 who are now adults, who are now TAY youth, and probably have children of their own. And so what is the approach from your office specifically, or the offices that you oversee specifically,
Right.
to address that, see that, and understand that? Because one thing that you guys understand is that when a child comes from a broken home or a home with violence in it, they're most likely to bring violence into their home. And when a parent has created a violent space for a child, that child is more likely to grow up and create a violent space as well. So I'll rephrase a little bit. Well, how are you guys addressing the fact that there are kids raised by the system that were raised in a violent space, in violent homes,
Right.
and when they were under the care of the system and not a parent?
A lot of great questions. One thing we're doing is, and we're going to show data in a little while, is we're trying to keep them home. Because once a child is in the system, whether it's probation, DCFS, or other systems, they can get caught up and they may not go home. And we've seen that, and this is really what we're speaking about. They don't have a loving person to help raise them, or they have a loving person who helps raise them. However, when they react because of the potential violence they saw or experienced firsthand physically, sometimes our caregivers aren't supported enough or prepared via training to understand that it's what's going to happen. And so we need to have that flexibility to be able to not say, come and get this child. So to answer, and I'm sorry, you asked a lot of good questions. If I miss a couple, please bring them back.
That's fine.
What we're doing is we started, and this isn't going to answer the important, I'm going to jump right to it. We work with the Department of Mental Health. They also don't always have the full staffing capacity so that the agencies they contract with can assign an effective therapist, AKA supporter counselor, to work with the youth. And what happens is they don't have that connection sometimes, and then they don't grow from that. DCFS, just to clarify, we do the home visitation. We try to connect the youth and family to services. We visit. We try to help support. But with respect to really impacting the emotional trauma, the experiences of these youth and parents, we are not, it would be a disservice if we tried to sit down and went deep into engaging them. So our role is to connect them with DMH providers and to communicate with those DMH providers to see if there's anything that we can do to help support the youth. And that is, it's not even easily said and done. It's hard to say because how can we expect one entity to fix, correct, modify years of trauma in some cases? So really it's a multidisciplinary approach. It has to be, we have to do a better job of communicating with the community so that we can have additional supports for our families and children. For example, we worked with Mayor Paris last year. We had, as you know, it gets very hot up here, and then it gets very cold up here.
Yes.
So Mayor Paris, through the city manager, we met with him last year, and they were able to identify, I believe it was 2 areas where families could have visitation, not out in the park where it was 110 degrees, or in the snow. Exactly. So I'm sort of jumping around, but really it's a multi-pronged approach. There is no magic pill. We have to continue to work together to do a better job. We have the AB 12 unit that I spoke of. Those staff, they have a lower caseload because they need to spend more time with those youth so that they can connect with them and they can provide them efficient supports. And some youth aren't ready. They won't be ready at 16, 16 and a half, but maybe at 17 they will. So our role is to be that consistent person, which doesn't always happen because you have attrition as well. We also have we have ILP coordinators in every single office, and they actually communicate with the youth as well. They aren't social workers. They used to be social workers, but their primary job role is to reach out to the youth to ask them, okay, listen, you're in 11th grade, I see your grades. We need to make sure you're ready to apply in November or before November for college. Or you've been talking about, per your social worker, you've been talking about moving in with your auntie when you turn 18 because you're going to go to the local college there. How can I help you with my connections? Because the youth, the ILP coordinators, and they changed their name, Lisa, and I forgot what it is, independent living program coordinators, they have those connections with schools and with others. There are a lot of examples that I could share, but it may not be enough. That's why we have to continue to partner and work with others so that we can do right by them.
Right, and I appreciate the transparency. Every time I go to a community meeting with DCFS, the transparency is key. And you coming here, and you talked about it has to be a multifaceted approach. This is what that kind of looks like, and I really do appreciate you getting here. And I have one more question
Sure.
before we move on. I'm so sorry.
This was just the beginning.
Right?
It was.
So you talked about we talked about the shortcomings. DCFS has been transparent about, like you said, we don't got it. We don't have it. And when we talk about perception versus reality and communicating that to the community hears you. The community hears what you're saying. The community hears what Ms. Wood's saying. The community hears what the DCFS is saying at the Faith Collaborative meetings. We're hearing you. But that same transparency, what the community isn't seeing, is that same transparency in the courtroom. When those reports are being made, when the reports are being made and said mom or dad hasn't been going to the visit with their child, but that report doesn't say that we're short on HSAs and mom and dad's resources are limited, or when they're just I don't have to tell you things that could fall through the cracks when somebody is underpaid, overworked, and you're short-staffed.
Yep.
And so is there an awareness in your office of that? And this is not just your office, this is countywide, right? So is there an awareness in your office that some of that same transparency at the community level isn't as transparent when it's time to get in front of a judge with a report?
I really can't answer that with 100% certainty. What I can say to you is that the executive team, which I'm a part of, we meet with the hearing officers every quarter. And we've been sharing some of our challenges that we've had, especially during COVID. During COVID, worldwide pandemic. But what I can share with you is that what you're telling me right now, we're listening, and I'm listening, and we can have those conversations with our staff. There's a rule 7. People need to hear it 7 times, or it's not going to click, especially as you get older. But I'm hearing you the first time, and I am going to take this back. I also just want to share, we don't want this to be a one-time. I'm hoping that when we're done, maybe I'll give you all my cards. Maybe you can come back with any suggestions that you have so we can partner better. And I'm going to share one more thing. It may not happen, but I actually applied to be on your commission about a week ago because, DCFS can speak a good game, but where are they? So here I am.
I appreciate that, and we will connect after this because I think that there is the city council wants to facilitate a community response to what's happening. We've had people come. I've been sitting on this dais with the mayor and the council, and we had people come crying to us saying we have nowhere else to turn. They took my kids. They took my kids because I was postpartum. They took my kids before I was in depression. They took my kids because I didn't know. I mean, when you talk about youth and TAG youth, these kids don't know what is domestic violence until they are arrested. They don't know what is a cycle of violence in these schools. And so I'm looking for a way, we are looking for a partnership with you so that we can it shouldn't take an investigation and then a court case opening up and then the child getting taken away and then the court ordering domestic violence, parenting classes. These are things that we should be putting on the radar for our young people before they get out into the world. That what's cute on the internet is a crime in real life.
Exactly.
So, yeah, thank you. We really appreciate it.
We are genuine in our desire to engage. We all the time hear DCFS badmouth. And yet, like I just shared, I applied because I will be there if I'm accepted, and I can answer questions, I can give my information, I oversee both offices, and we can have conversations. There's some confidentiality issues, but I can speak to that to individuals who are concerned. And so that's, we're committed. We're definitely committed. Lisa, I said, I'm going to bring Miss Woods with me. She said, I want to go. Okay, thank you. So I do want to talk about domestic violence for a hot second. We just finished a policy that speaks to domestic violence. It speaks to the terminology. It speaks to the abused survivor versus, and it speaks to the one who abused or was the abuser versus the perpetrator. So we're trying to change our language, and we just finalized the domestic violence policy, intimate partner violence policy. We also are working with Valley Oasis and with the UCLA Pritzker Foundation. We're going to try to establish a pilot out of the Lancaster office where families that come in because of intimate partner violence get connected to resources sooner rather than later. So UCLA Pritzker has some money, and they want to work with Valley Oasis, who would be partnering with DCFS. So this is also going to include education, because our staff don't necessarily know that, and some do, but not everybody, because we get new staff all the time, new social workers. Not all staff know that when a parent is at a domestic violence shelter, they can't have visitors. So a social worker might say, wait a minute, I went to see mom and she refused to give me her address. That's a bad negative, right? We are going to continue to educate each other and our staff so that we better understand not just our community, but the rules by agencies that we don't oversee or fully understand. So we're trying. All right, so.
I was like, that was, we can come back for the second half.
So I do want to say this. We're going to share some data, and I'm stealing from you again. It's going to clearly show that African American and Black children are brought into the system probably twice as much as they should. And I'm going to add this. The community is calling Child Protection Hotline 2 to 3 times more than, disproportional. So what do we do at the front end as well? That's something we need to work on as well. How do we educate the community, whether that's the school, medical professionals, and others, so that they can reach out to service providers for support and not necessarily always call the hotline and say, I didn't see it all, but this child is at risk or is not safe. So we are working on that as well. And I apologize, Zellery. I'm going to hand off to Zellery, and I will stand next to you. If you don't mind, I'll stand over here.
I was going to say, we can just come back and do the second half of the presentation. So I'm going to try to get through this for time's sake. So we'll start with just defining a couple of terms that's quite relevant to what we're talking about today. Disproportionality. When we talk about disproportionality, we're speaking of the overrepresentation or underrepresentation of a racial or ethnic group compared to its percentage in the total population. And when we talk about disparity, we're speaking more to outcomes. So we see disparity when there are unequal outcomes of one racial or ethnic group compared to the outcomes for another racial or ethnic group. This is a graphic that just kind of illustrates disproportionality and disparity. You may have seen it before. The first graphic represents the level of inequity in our country today. These are groups of people who have significant advantages over other racial groups in our country, and not everyone starts off at the same playing field. It's just not even. In fact, you can see in the first illustration that the child in the purple shirt has to literally dig himself out of the hole. Equality ensures, or the thought process behind equality is that we all get the same rights, and therefore everyone will receive the same resources that they need to be successful. And this is essentially what we often hear is, I'm colorblind, I don't see race, right? But this is absolutely a misconception that treating everyone the same creates an even playing field, because it does not. Equality does not erase the disadvantages or privileges, nor does it eliminate the historical oppression that we as African Americans have experienced since we arrived in this country. The opposite of equality would be equity, and equity is created when we are able to see color, culture, race, gender expression, and I'm sorry? Yes, we celebrate it, and we see it and use it to dismantle the systemic barriers that we've experienced and to eliminate oppression. So this slide is an illustration, or provides the data that Mr. Ramos talked about. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time with this. This data represents the population of youth 0 to 18 serviced by the Lancaster Regional Office. And as you can see, for the Lancaster population, we have our Hispanic and Latino population representing 47.3%. Our white ethnic group represents 26.6%, African Americans 22.8%, and our American Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian Pacific Islander, and others are within our Lancaster service area at 3.3%. However, our caseloads we see for our Hispanic Latino population, those are the caseloads again in Lancaster in our office, are at 36.5%, which is a little bit lower than their representation in Lancaster. Our caseload is made up for our white ethnic group at 15.1%, again, significantly less and underrepresentation than what the representation is in the community. When we get to our African American children, while we are represented at 22.8%, our caseloads are at 47.6%, more than double. And I'm gonna let you sit in that for a little bit, because you should feel some kind of way about that. And then again, when we go to our group in the gold, our American Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian and Pacific Islander, and others, they represent 0.9% of our caseloads in Lancaster. When we move over to the third column, we're talking about the referrals that we receive. And Mr. Ramos, shared with you, those are the calls that come into the hotline. Those at the hotline undergo their process. A referral has been determined that we need to investigate, and a referral is generated. So our referrals, again, Hispanic Latinos make up 40.7% of our referrals, whites 13.5%, African American 44.1%. Again, they're 22.8% in the community, and our American Indian and others at 1.8%.
I'm sorry, Ms. Woods.
Yes.
Some of us are having trouble seeing this, but we hear you.
Okay.
Are we going to be able to have this in a digital form?
We absolutely can provide that to you,
Please.
yes.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. You know what? It's even a little hard for me to see, and I'm wearing glasses.
Yeah, I lost my eyes. Please continue.
Did you have any questions or wanted me to go over any
Yes,
numbers
I have
again?
one question. So does other also include, down at the bottom, does other also include mixed children, because I would be interested in the numbers of children that are in the system that may not technically be black, but have black parents, or children in the system that may not technically be Hispanic or Latino, but have Hispanic or Latino parents,
That's a
or
great
a parent.
question. Look, all of your questions are just amazing. So, our families self-identify.
Okay.
So we ask our families when we go in, how do you identify yourself? So we don't make any assumptions about how a family identifies. So it could possibly, could possibly be a biracial child.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go to the next column, which is our substantiated referrals. And that means an emergency response social worker has gone out, has met with the family, conducted their investigation, and they've made a determination that allegations that were made in that referral were true. And it could possibly be that new allegations were discovered during the course of the investigation, right? So something is happening with the family, and we said something is true, and a referral has been deemed substantiated. And of those referrals, again, we see disproportionate numbers, right? So I'll read them for you, because I know you all. Do you have the digital form in front of you? No, they don't. Not yet? Oh, okay. So our substantiated referrals for our Hispanic and Latino population, 39.4%. Again, the disproportionality there, underrepresentation, right? 12.7% for whites, 46.4% for our African American families, and 1.4% for our American Indian and others. Now, just because a referral may be substantiated, we found the allegations to be true, does not necessarily mean that we're removing children from their parents, from their families. But what we see here in our fifth column are our actual removals, and where a child has entered the foster care system, meaning they've been removed from both parents. Our Hispanic population at 34.2%. So again, 39.4% of the referrals were substantiated, and of those referrals, 34.2% of the children were removed. We move on down to whites at 15.9%, African American at 47.3%, and for our American Indian and others, 2.6%.
And those removals is 181 children.
For the African American children, yes.
So that number for all those columns is children.
Those are children. Yes, those are children. We say 0 to 17, but we don't remove 18-year-olds. So I'll say 17 and 11 months.
So that's not but that's not cases, because even if the one case has 5 children, that's still represented in that number.
That's represented,
Okay.
yes. And again, this data is from July 1st of 2021 through June of 2022. So it's pretty, current. So we have removals. And then our second to the last column would be our actual foster care caseload numbers. Again, those are children that have been removed from both parents and are in foster care. Hispanic population makes up 34.3% of our foster care caseload, 16.1% of white children. Again, we have our white population at 26.6%, yet they make up 16.1% of the foster care caseload. Our African American children, again, in Lancaster, represent 22.8% of the population here, but yet in our Lancaster office, African American children represent 48.7% of our caseloads. Almost half of our caseloads are Black children. And we get down to American Indian Alaskan Native, Pacific Islander, they make up 1%. Our last column are exits from foster care. And when you look at it, because I had to ask a question right before coming here, like, what does that really mean? Because at first glance, it looks pretty good for us, right?
Aged out too.
Exactly. So we have 40.6 for our Hispanic, Latinos, 17.2 for our white population. African American children are exiting at 41.9. Believe I'm reading that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. And 0.4% for our Pacific Islander, Native American, and other. So I did see clarity, and you're absolutely right. A lot of them are aging out. They could enter a plan of legal permanency adoption, kin gap with a relative, meaning legal guardianship with a relative or a non-relative. And they could be going home. But unfortunately, we don't have the numbers here that really breaks that down.
Can I ask for, in the future, if you can, for a specific piece of data?
Sure.
Return for with these same criteria, return to parents?
Sure. Would you like for us to send that to you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Will you be, in the future, will you
At the
break this
bottom.
out?
No, not that one. The speaker.
Where are these speakers? Okay, I guess so.
There you go.
There we go. For the exit, and out of this, the 41%. So you don't have it broken out as to what that exit is. Is it age out, or is it adoption, or whatever are the different reasons that they exit the foster care program? Or do you guys plan to?
Yes, we actually do have some data.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's not a part of our presentation, but we will get that information to you because I think it is very important to understand and to know that.
I'm trying to understand another number, a set of numbers. I was looking at the substantiated referrals, right? And I'm looking again at the African-American population, 46.4%, and then the removals are 47, and I'm, point, I can't see that well. I'm trying to understand that. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So we may have, like I said, we investigate a referral, have allegations of, say, physical abuse, just to give an example. And it's been determined one parent physically abuse little Joe. Little Joe primarily lives with his mother. Well, father is non-offending. Father was not a part of this. Father resides out of the home, and little Joe, can safely reside with his father, and he does not enter the foster care system. So the allegation against mom may be substantiated and found to be true, but that does not mean necessarily that the child has entered the foster care system. And there are some cases where maybe an allegation was substantiated, say both parents in the home, but we were able to mitigate those safety risks, those safety factors, bring a team around and plan around that safety, and we're able to get services in place, supports, and we can leave that child in the home. So just because a referral is maybe found to be true or substantiated, it doesn't automatically mean that a child enters the foster care system.
I guess what I'm seeing is, to me, now based on these numbers and it's just a little bit higher, and I may not be quite understanding this, but you have the substantiated referral, but it seems the removals are happen at a higher rate than the actual substantiated referral. So
Right.
that's where I'm trying to understand.
I think I understand.
Yeah.
So when we're calculating percentages, it's for all of the children who have been removed. So it's like the denominator. So our denominator is for all of the children removed from their homes. And therefore, based upon those numbers, you know, the collective, the Black children represent the 40, look, I can't see. The Black children represent the 47.3%. Sure.
So if you look at the total number of.
You want to come up so we can hear? She's better at talking about the numerator denominator.
Okay. Hi. Correct. So it's really we need to readjust the order, first of all, because I don't like the order. So that's the first thing that I'll be working on. So if you look at the amount of referrals, it says 4,493 were received during the time of July 1st for basically that fiscal year. Of that 4,493, 895 of them were substantiated. Okay? So if you look at that, of the 895 that were substantiated, 383 resulted in the child needing to go into out-of-home care. Okay? So therefore, your percentage, for example, of African American removals has a much lower denominator. So out of 383, we look at how many of those children were African American, and that percentage is 47.3% of the 383 total. So your denominator is less, so therefore your percentage looks higher or equivalent to the other one, but really for the 46.4, which is the amount of substantiated referrals for African American children, that base was out of 895 substantiated referrals. And trust me, I've been here a long time, and it's taken me this long to figure it out. So I give you big props that you're looking at this and being able to really decipher. It's very, very confusing to look at. But it may look like the numbers are right aligned, but it's really, they have to each be looked at individually for what that column is really addressing to have it sort of make sense, hopefully. Correct. So in the column of removals, for example, of 383 children that were removed into out-of-home care, that means they could not remain with either parent, you have 131, for example, were Hispanic or Latino children. Of that 383, 61 were white, 181 were African American, and then 10 were in the Native American, other Asian Pacific population of that group of children that had to be removed into out-of-home care. So each column, but yet it's still connected as we know how that process works. The caseload column is really out of order because the first thing that happens is we receive referrals. So it should be your population, then your referrals, then your substantiated referrals, and then your removals become cases. I don't know, and feel free to ask me anymore, and I can also stay after and try to maybe help decipher any of that if that would be.
You can stay up here if you like.
No, you've got it, you've got it.
Yeah.
It looks like you're taking more children out of the home.
Right.
Even though there's less, substantiated referrals in that. So I was
Right.
wondering about that.
I hope
So,
she
yeah, it
was
makes
able to
sense. Thank
explain
you.
it. Okay.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, this slide just shows, and highlights the fact that disproportionality and disparity, of course, exists across multiple systems, including medical care, mental health, housing, law enforcement, and education. So in our office, and I'm going to get into some of the specific work that we're doing, we have adopted our strategic plan from what was formerly the LA County Strategic Plan, Invest LA. You may have heard of it. Well, we're Invest Lancaster. And we have our 3 pillars, which are strengthening children, family, and youth, workforce excellence, and community and cross-sector partnerships. Under our strengthening children, family, and youth, we're utilizing our ERDD roundtable process, and I'm going to get into that more specifically on the next slide. faith-based collaboration, so definitely using our faith-based partners to strengthen children and families, and respecting what faith means to African-American families traditionally. I think in the past, I started with the county over 20 years ago, and we would just kind of dismiss that. It wasn't DCFS approved. Well, we are beginning to learn, understand, and accept the fact that our faith-based community is critical to supporting Black families. Our Cultural Broker Program, another program that I will speak to on the next slides, and community-based meetings, and, you know, presenting such as we are here to inform and to invite collaboration and partnerships.
And all of these are up and running right now.
Yes, this is what we're doing right now.
There's a problem. A lot of this is not on the resource package that parents are getting when for services that are from social workers with services that are available. And I will concede to the fact that the folks that I've talked to and the resource packages that I've seen have come from another office outside of Lancaster and Palmdale, and they say, here's what's in your area, and you get to the last page, and you've been crossed out almost everything in that page because everything is closed, but you have all of those. So that's another way we can collaborate. I'm sorry to interrupt. That's another way we can collaborate by getting updated resource packets out there for families.
Yes, and I can be the liaison to those offices as well, share real-life examples of what's the gaps.
Right. Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. So our second pillar, workforce excellence, and that's what we're doing in Lancaster. When you were asking the question earlier about the trainings and what are we doing specifically, I can speak to Lancaster, and I'm very proud of the work that we're doing to bring that cultural humility and competency. In fact, we had a leadership training during our scheduled meeting time where we had Mr. Brandon Jones come in and speak to us about racial equity, inclusion, and diversity. So we just had some of that this morning. And we have ongoing conversations with our coach developers, amongst each other. We're very transparent in calling people in rather than calling people out, because we want to we used to use the term safe space, right, to have these conversations, but we want to create a brave space to be vulnerable and to talk about these really important issues that we need to discuss when it comes to biases and implicit bias and how and why we're making the decisions that we make. So that's kind of incorporated into our unit-based skill building. We have Wisdom Wednesdays with our new hires. So when new staff are coming to us, even before they start the training academy, twice a month on Wednesdays, they attend in-service trainings in the Lancaster office, where we're talking about not only, cultural issues and implicit bias, but just good social work practice. Because if that's what we're doing across the board, all of our families will benefit from that. And it's not just Black families that deserve cultural competency and humility, is for all ethnic groups. Our ERDD roundtables, again, something I'm going to talk to you about in the next slides, and our coaching supports in the form of our coach developers. Our community and cross-sector partnerships, Father Strong, which you've heard about, prevention and aftercare, which you've heard about. Those are the agencies that also provide our family preservation services. They also provide services to families. Say a referral comes in and it's substantiated and we don't open a case. We can absolutely refer to prevention and aftercare to work with the family. So again, not all substantiated referrals equal an open case. We have effective Black parenting courses that are free in the community. Since the pandemic, they're offered on Zoom, so it makes it readily available to parents who can participate during the time that the classes are offered. Again, our faith-based collaborative and our AV foster youth education program, and that's where our school-based social workers are assigned to the schools. They absolutely can, yes. Even our Father Strong, when it first started, it wasn't accepted as like a parenting program, and now it is, yes, Absolutely. So I'm very excited to talk about the roundtables because I started the roundtables in the Lancaster office in late 2018 when I arrived. The roundtables essentially is a process that we started in person pre-COVID. They're now held via video conference every Thursday morning. We bring emergency response referrals to a panel that is comprised of course, the investigating social worker, the supervisor. Several of the managers are on the call. I'm proud to say our regional administrator is on that call every week because it's very important to her. We have community partners on the call, representatives from our prevention and aftercare. We have our cultural brokers on the call. We have representatives from Department of Mental Health. At times, we may have our education liaison from LACO on the call. We have representatives from our faith-based community and service providers. So there's this panel of people who come to talk about a family that where there are issues with the referral, the worker may be struggling with engagement. There may be some things going on where we think we may have to remove these children. So that gives us an opportunity to really slow down and process, put all these heads together and talk about primarily, is there any way possible that we can leave these children safely in the home of their parent? So when we walk away from that panel discussion, we want to walk away knowing that we've explored all options prior to a removal. Sometimes we absolutely need to remove, right? And then there are other times where those other folks at the table can give their input. They help us to even process biases that we're not aware of. They call us in. Hey, wait, stop. You don't understand. This is the dynamic between a Tay youth who's experienced being in a home of violence and trauma their entire life. This is what you're seeing. Or mom and dad had a fight. That's not domestic violence. That's two people who don't know how to resolve conflict, right? And I have a service with my agency where we can come in and support the family. And so sometimes, you know, we may not have a definitive plan because there's more investigation that needs to take place, but we've started the conversation. When it comes to some of our personal biases, specifically, I remember us addressing colorism within that forum. So when things come up that's, you know, relevant to culture, race, how we see families, that's like, it creates an opportunity for us to have those transparent conversations. It's not always easy. This work is not easy, but it's necessary. Any questions about the roundtable? I'm sorry? I love it. We can definitely extend you an invitation.
Yes, please.
And I will say, you know, we have to give a lot of credit to our staff because it's not easy for social workers to come to a panel with all of these people and share their work, to be asked questions that they may not be able to answer. So again, we do our best to create a brave space for this process to take place. And we continue to work on it. You know, it's not perfect, but we continue to work on it.
Zelda, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
How many cases does each social worker have? How
Average
large is their
caseload.
caseload?
And are we talking about an emergency response worker?
I'm talking about the 189 that you mentioned, that was mentioned earlier.
Is that our continuing services?
service. Mm-hmm.
On average, they're probably anywhere from 23 to 25 cases. And a case is one child. That's 23 to 25 children. I think is about the average right now. And as Frank said, with some of our specialized units, they carry lower caseloads because of the demands, requirements that are required for that specific population of youth.
Okay, and is that one visit per month that they visit that 25?
Generally, yes. However, children who were recently returned home, like within 90 days, or there's a mandate of twice per month visits in the home. And of course, as often as necessary. There's some workers who may visit a family multiple times a week because that family is in crisis. So those would be minimum state mandates and DCFS policy. So in addition to that, absolutely as often as necessary.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there a maximum mandate as far as, how many cases should a social worker really have?
That's the $1 million question.
Depends on who you ask. There was,
Right.
I apologize. There was a study done 20-plus years ago. I think it recommended 15 cases or children, and this was many, many years ago. AB 2030, SB 2030, Senate Bill 2030. We've been working over the last few years, I think every 3 or so years, with negotiating with the union, we've actually lowered the number every single time. But as stated earlier, the work, the requirement per law and by the hearing officers has increased. So while you're lowering the caseload, the numbers, the work itself continues to increase. And the expectation of a social worker to wear multiple hats, even more hats, has increased. So that's why we need to have the roundtables. That's why we need to make sure that we work with others, or we can't. There's no way that the children families will have will maximize, safety and well-being.
What year was that? SB 2030.
Maybe 25 years ago. When I was a social worker, I think in the 90s, it was already out.
That's still a standing law now, though.
It's we've been looking at this. I think so the state did the assessment, but the union has negotiated with our department every 3 years or so to lower the caseloads and to increase staffing. So we actually have over time have increased staffing. Retention is key, though, because we have staff that leave the Lancaster office because it's such a stressful job. And quite honestly, they can go work, some of them can go work for Kaiser, Department of Mental Health, and you don't have to be the primary case-carrying social worker, and then you don't have to be the one that is asked questions when something happens on the news.
I would just want to add one thing. Child welfare studies nationwide, worldwide, will always say, and they are right, that the lower the caseload, the better a family will be serviced. And so we will continue to do everything we can. Frank advocates for us tirelessly. He knows I'm a big mouth about it as well, that we will continue to do everything that we can to have the lowest caseloads possible, because it allows social workers more opportunity to work with families. So you can Google many, many studies, and they will always suggest as low as caseloads as possible. It's going to always be best practice.
Ms. Ramos, I think a way for us to do that is there is nobody more enthusiastic about social work than foster parents, than families who have gone through this system and have come out of it on the other side, good or bad. And so if there was and this is another point that I would love to work with you on, is how do we, and this is the city of Lancaster wants to see how we could do this, how do we make it so that more of these families, more of these dads, more of these mothers who are in these court order programs can turn around and be facilitators? How can we remove the barrier to that so that they can turn around and become a service for their community and give their experience to the next batch of parents who's going to be in that program? And how do we turn those facilitators into social workers? Because those facilitators are telling those people in those classes, I can't keep apologizing for the social worker. I can't keep apologizing for the court system. I don't know why they do that. I don't know why that is happening. So if there's a way for us to funnel
We would love to have that conversation. We have parent partners, but we don't have we used to have more. So parent partners are parents who went through the system, so they have that lived experience. We generally have them sitting at the lobby in most offices, and so when a parent comes in, they reach out, they walk up to them and they ask them, how can I help you? I've been through this, let me help navigate this. Because the system, as you all can only imagine, very, very difficult to navigate. The terminology, when I was a new social worker many years ago, I didn't know what. It was very, very challenging. And then the laws change and new policies and initiatives come about. But we would love to have that conversation with you. Some of it is funding too. How can we, because parents, they deserve to get paid. So how do we work that out as well? And I wanted to add, Supervisor Barger's chosen deputy, Monica Bankin, I meet with her virtually every month, and we always talk about staffing. How's the staffing coming along? What do you need? And so we've been working with county HR, not just our department's HR, but county HR, to help bridge some of those gaps, because sometimes you have great people that want to apply and they want to be social workers. Then they go into the website, they apply for an LA County job, and depending on the timing, there may not be a hiring window. So how do we circle back to that potential social worker or human service aide and say, the window is not open right now, but we haven't forgotten you? Because people get discouraged. But yes, let's have those conversations.
You help us come up with a plan, we'll find funding for it.
Love it. Thank you. Love that.
I think about just piggybacking off of something Sean said. If you have these foster children or people who have been, children who have been victims, transition into better lives, because they do, right? Some do, thankfully. That could be a pipeline. Those people could be, somehow, they're definitely, because of experience, would probably be great voices in that social work field. And so I don't know how you guys track them or follow them when they come through this, but that may be a great resource for, pipeline and possible.
Thank you. I think we're all taking notes of all of your suggestions.
Hope y'all getting overtime.
Can I have a question? I have a question regarding a parent partner.
Yes.
Isn't that a volunteer position? Or is that a paid position?
No, our parents in partnership, no, they are paid positions now.
Okay.
Yes. However, our cultural brokers are volunteers. Okay. So the cultural broker program is, they're volunteers from the community who work to foster early engagement with the parent and the social workers to develop like a good, solid working relationship. Oftentimes, I shouldn't say often, sometimes social workers just have trouble getting through the door, right? Or we may be in a position where children have been removed and the parents just don't want to talk to the social worker or work with the social worker. So we have cultural brokers that we will bring in. Of course, the parents they have to agree to it because all of their information is confidential. But if they agree, the cultural broker will engage with the parent, similar to a parent in partnership or a PIP. Help them navigate the system. Help them or empower them to voice their concerns, their own strengths, and really be an active participant in their case planning. Cultural brokers can support parents by attending child and family team meetings with the parents. Cultural brokers, and I also want to say we focus a lot on cultural brokers working with parents, but they can also work with relative caregivers. They can work with our foster youth. So wherever there is a need where, we feel like, or a parent may feel like they need additional support from a person that they can identify with, who is not DCFS, we'll refer out.
Is this a county-wide or office-specific?
This is countywide. It's countywide. I'm not sure if every office has a cultural broker program active, up and running. If there are some offices that don't have a robust, cultural broker program, that is definitely the goal. Yes, sir. I also want to say our cultural brokers are unique in that they not only hold parents accountable, they hold DCFS accountable. So when we're not, doing what we need to do, a parent is struggling with us, they're not getting telephone calls, they don't understand, and yeah, our cultural brokers would call us. They would call the social workers and say, hey, or if the social worker is just not understand some of those cultural pieces. So again, this is another resource for us and our staff to be taught and educated on family dynamics and what may be going on cultural with the family that the social worker is just missing. And they're valuable to all staff. I always like to point out, and you all know this, just because you're Black doesn't mean you know everything Black, because all of our experiences are different. We come from different backgrounds, different places. And so that's an assumption that some people make, and it's just absolutely not true. So that cultural broker is very valuable to us.
So important.
Yes.
And but like you said, it may not be coming from every office. So again, there could be still young or families out here who in the system that don't have access to this because they're in another office, and that's not a resource that you guys can share with another office because of.
Yeah, actually, I would like to share that we've had cultural brokers from down the hill, like from the Torrance office, connect with the family in Lancaster, and has driven up here, has my number on speed dial, obviously, will call me about a case. So, I think, of course, we can do better at getting the word out, but I believe our community is becoming aware that the cultural brokers are out there. And I know this isn't part of the presentation, but if I haven't asked if there's anything that you can do to help us in our efforts to recruit, to get the word out about the cultural broker program. That's definitely a need for the Lancaster office, because it's kind of like ebb and flow. At one point, you may have several, and then you're down to one. And we have a lot of our staff who are really reaching out and submitting referrals for cultural brokers, and the cultural brokers' availability, because they're volunteers, they're not paid, they may not be able to work as intensely with the family as they would like or as that we would like. So that is definitely a need in the Lancaster office. How are we doing on time? Okay. So ultimately, our goal is to eradicate disproportionality and disparity, that all children and families will be equally represented, that every child and family will receive fair and just treatment by systems with whom they interact. And as my boss says, we don't want there to be a need for an ERDD initiative in LA County. So that is our ultimate goal, is eradication. I would like to share with you some data through July, from 2019 through July of 22. And what you see here is children entering foster care within the Lancaster office over this time period. And the bottom line,
We cut off the legend.
I did.
I think the red is, Caucasian.
The red line, I'm sorry,
Bottom line is
Caucasian. The gray is our Hispanic and Latino ethnic group. And the blue line is our African American group. And you can see in 2018, our numbers, we were started kind of low, and we leveled out and we spiked. You can see at the start of the pandemic, our numbers dropped. And since that time, we've been doing some very, intentional work with our roundtables, our cultural brokers, with our faith-based initiative and community engagement. And you can see that our numbers have steadily declined over time. And at the end of June of 2022, we had 175 entries. So and what's really critical is it's not just Black folks. The practice, social work practice is independent of all these other factors that we talk about. We have to consider them, but good, solid social work practice across the board impacts every single ethnic group. And that means children are staying home safely with their families, they're getting the support. It means social workers are reaching out to parents and saying, who matters in your life? Who can help with planning around the safety and well-being of your children? And so we received this data kind of at the last minute and put it in. But I thought it was really important for us to highlight the fact that the work we're doing, we are seeing positive results from it. And so we're going to keep pushing and keep doing it. We're always sitting in the seat of learning, learning how to do things better, exploring how we can do things better, exploring the needs of our families and the community, so that we can do a good job with them. Because we definitely value a healthy community, healthy families, and healthy and safe children. I think that's the.
May I add something?
Yeah, it's your turn, I think.
It is? Almost.
Almost.
Just wanted to add, the Lancaster and Palmdale office, 8 offices total. We, staff were trained on what's called, the acronym is WIG, Wildly Important Goal. And the one goal that 8 out of 20 offices have, including Lancaster and Palmdale, is to reduce the number of African-American children entering the system. It's not Latinos, white, Native Americans. We believe our practice, as we change it, it will impact everybody. But we are focused on this population. And I'll talk about something else.
Okay, one more after this. Okay, so collective impact, in order to be successful, is going to take all of us working together, collaborating with partnerships we have, and forming new partnerships. And this is a short video of an actual father from one of our ERDD units. He's sharing his experience. He did give us permission to videotape him and to share this video with you all. And so I'm gonna go ahead and play this. And Frank, do you think? No? Uh-oh.
Oh, wait, there is a play button.
Is there a way? Uh-oh.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Travis Washington. I'm a former prisoner, as you could say. When I was in prison, some things happened with the mother of my 3 daughters, Burgundy Pacoima and Scarlett Washington, and they were placed in foster care. I was determined to get my children upon my release. So when I got released, even while I was in there, I took all the steps that I needed to take to get my children out of the foster care system and get them back with their father, because the mother wasn't doing too much of her part to get them back. When I became a part of the DCFS, from the beginning, it's been good, because it's been a lot of good people involved with my children, social workers and everything like that. But now I'm a part of the ERDD program, and that program, I didn't know too much about it when I first got involved with it, and I wasn't so sure that they was for me and my girls. But immediately, right after that, when I met my social worker, along with the supervisor, Ms. Kobe Nash, I got a quick understanding that this program, ERDD, is for us, for us men that's trying to get our children, for the women that's trying to get their children, and just for minority people and people of color in general. I got sick, and I ended up in a hospital for about 2 months while everything was going on. And immediately when I got out the hospital, I met my new social worker, which is Miss Samantha Maybon, and which is a great social worker. She's forward with everything, and she does everything she says she's gonna do, plus more. And between me being involved with her, Miss Kobe Nash, and the ERDD program, I got my children back. Almost immediately after I met Miss Maybon, I got my children back out of by the court. The court ordered my children back. So now I got them back. I got them living with me currently at my grandmother's house. We'll be getting my own home real soon. And that's pretty much a part of my story. And I highly appreciate this program. I highly appreciate DCFS and ERDD all in one, because it's really helped me and assisted me and pretty much guided me through everything that I needed to do and know and go to obtain the custody of my daughters back. So I got them back now, and I'm on the road to get my own place. You know, I had to go through getting their birth certificates and social security cards and everything like that, checking them in new schools once they were released from the foster care that they was involved in, the foster home. And
Is that it? Okay.
and hopefully that's it. It seems like that's pretty much it. I was also involved with the Father Strong parenting class group, and they, after that, after I graduated, got my certificate of completion, they involved me in further activities that they got, that they had going on, like in Palmdale. They had a thing right there in, at the DCFS building in Palmdale off of Trade Center Drive, and different things like that. So just being a part of DCFS in general and ERDD program, it really has helped me and opened up my eyes about what it takes for somebody, especially like me, getting out of prison, to get their kids back, because they assist me in every way I need to be assisted in. And that's pretty much what I got to say to everybody, and thank you very much for the program and for providing it. Thank you to the DCFS and the ERDD organization and everybody else who's involved in helping people get their children back in a positive manner. Y'all have a good evening. I'm Travis Washington.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
So we know that parents don't all experience that, right? Not all parents will, it's optics, it's feeling. They're not all going to say thank you, because we're not perfect. But we're very proud of the efforts that we've been making, and we think that we have a quality program that can continue to improve. So we're almost done. Are we here till 7:30 or 7?
We here till the agenda is on.
All right, we're almost there. Zellery, first of all, thank you. Thank you, appreciate you. You did a great job. So coordinated, purposeful efforts, taking our efforts to the next level. Wanted to just talk about a few things that we've been working on. I actually touched on a couple already. I am a part of the Antelope Valley Resource Infusion Group. This is a group that comprises of DMH, Theon Perkins, she's a manager with DMH, First 5 LA, Roxana Martinez, Ron Brown, I think he's the CEO and or ED of Children's Bureau, and I know I'm missing a couple others, but we've been working for 3 years on a collective impact in the community. What can we do? Number one, listen to the community, but what can we do to support the community so the community can support themselves? To make a long story short, we identified 3 communities where there is a high, this is in the Antelope Valley, so it's not just Lancaster, but Lancaster is one of them, where there is a high number of referrals called in on African-American families. And so what we're doing is we've actually utilized some money to hire community members, and it's in the infancy stage, but we are rallying the leadership in those 3 communities to start leading groups, which will include providers, service providers, so that they can empower themselves with support from us in however manner they see it. And we're really excited about that. It's taken time. I joined in 2019, and we're now, I think, we're seeing some fruit. AV stakeholders meeting, I spoke about that a little bit earlier. We meet with, we meaning DCFS, meets with other county partners and with Supervisor Barger approximately every quarter to talk about our efforts at trying to improve our overall community. Intentional AV recruitment and staffing efforts, I spoke about that earlier. We've been working with AJCC, colleges, and Supervisor Barger's office to try and really cultivate that talent in the community and try to find a way to keep them in the community. What we didn't mention earlier is social workers in both of the Antelope Valley offices and supervising children's social workers are the only staff in LA County DCFS that get a 10% retention bonus for working in the Antelope Valley. So the CEO and the board approved a 10% increase because historically it's hard to keep staff in the Antelope Valley. And it's for a lot of reasons. Sometimes people move up here and then their family grows, or you have family down towards LA and they leave. And the job is not easy. Risk stratification, we have a tool that we're using in 3 offices: Lancaster, Santa Fe Springs, and Belvedere, which is in the City of Commerce. This tool, it's predictive analytics. It's very controversial. There's a lot of research out there where people say, look, you can't put an algorithm together because it's biased. And so I'll just share what this does. What it does is it brings in about 300 elements that is pulled from our statewide child welfare system, and it identifies the top 10% or top 10 high-risk families based on multiple factors. It could be, for example, the number of substantiated referrals, the age of a child. One factor that must be included to qualify is a child that is under the age of 10. So what we've been doing is when a referral is generated, there is a flag system that flags families that are identified at a high risk of coming into the system. And this is based on research. We're working with the Children's Data Network and Dr. Putnam Hornstein on this. And so what has happened is in the AV in Lancaster, the top 10% of these referrals, the high-risk referrals, the majority are African-American families. And the actual algorithm within the system does not identify race or ethnicity. So that's not a factor that's in the equation. But it's telling you a lot. It's saying that people, implicit bias, people continue to call because of what people look like. People are equating poverty to abuse, and then they might add a couple things that will require us to go out. And so what this has done for us is it's changing our practice. It's enhancing our practice. At Lancaster, what we're doing is for every, it's called an enhanced support referral. It was called complex risk referral. And we're like, wait a minute, these families aren't complex risk. We need to provide them enhanced support because sometimes optics plays a role. So what we've done is we're consulting with these, we're working with these families via the ERDD roundtable. The middle manager, assistant regional administrators, they are consulting with the worker and the supervisor when these families are identified. We're holding multidisciplinary teams. We actually, about a year in preparation for this, about a year and a half ago, with the support of my then director, Bobby Cagle, we hosted a meeting with our county partners to say, look, these families are at risk. We didn't know back then that for Lancaster it was going to be African-American, the majority African-American families. But we said these families are at risk of coming back into the system, and we need to make sure that if I call you, let's just say a DPSS, that you're going to have someone who's going to speak to us and or the family to help connect them with CalWorks, GAIN, whatever services are available, because people don't always know, right? We talked about that. People don't always know what's available. So risk stratification has not been expanded to any other office because we are taking it slow, because politically, you know, when you think of algorithms, predictive analytics, we should be leery of what government is putting together. So right now, we don't have the data yet, but what this does, it's one piece, one tool in our tool belt. It's identifying the families, and then it's up to us in terms of practice. What are we doing to help these families? That's the bottom line. And the last thing is Social Equity Commission. How can we, and I took some notes, Chairman Cannon, how can we work together so that we, A, listen to you and what you see here every month and at the city council meetings, and then how can we serve better our common children and families? Because people forget in other organizations that these families belong to all of us. We're here to support all of them, but oftentimes as DCFS, what are you doing? Why aren't you doing A, B, and C? Well, it has to be a collective effort. So that is our presentation. There's our information. You have a hard copy. Yes, sir.
Yes. So sorry. Before we get to the questions from the rest of the members of the public, I've worked to make sure that I kept all of my questions to the very end. But I do have a few from both myself and some community members in the Valley, so this might take a minute, but I appreciate your patience. And we will rapid fire them to try to get through them as quickly as possible. So firstly, are there any cases besides physical or sexual violence in which law enforcement is involved with any cases concerning young people and families?
It certainly can happen. The law requires that for physical and sexual abuse, allegations that those be cross-reported to law enforcement.
Okay, but there are other cases.
And there are others because sometimes a neighbor will call because there's a ruckus, something is happening, they'll call the law enforcement, and so they will arrive first, and it will be because a neighbor or someone called them. So yes, that's possible.
But it's not like first and immediate approach in cases other than physical and sexual violence.
That's exactly right, and we do the physical and sexual because that's what the law dictates. We are clearly aware that there's plenty of controversy with respect to law enforcement engagement. And so we have 2 social workers that work with law enforcement. We didn't expand, and we're very careful to make sure that we stay within our charge, which is to assess for child safety and to support families.
Okay, awesome. Additionally, you had talked about stakeholder meetings a lot, and just in terms of public transparency, are those stakeholder meetings available to the public?
There are a lot of various stakeholder meetings. To answer your question, yes. What we can do is we can sort of, we have a few. We can share that information, but by all means.
Yes.
And another, I just want to add this. If there is any public community members who want to meet with us specifically, we'd be more than happy to.
I will make sure that I pass your information
Yes.
along, absolutely.
I will add this caveat. If they want to talk about Frank, my neighbor, and he's doing this and he's doing that, and I want to know what's going on, we can't share that. That's confidential. But we can certainly share all that we know to a parent, especially a legal guardian, and we can share to an extent to the relative caregiver.
Just in regards to understanding the system.
For sure.
Absolutely.
If you all want to hold, we can do DCFS, Child Abuse 101. If you all can help us facilitate that in some room somewhere or conference room, we'll be more than happy to put something together and share with the community.
Absolutely, we'll work to, take you up on that.
Great.
Additionally, when is the last time that your office presented at AVC just in regards to the hiring process with the department?
It's probably been about 1.25 years. What we did is we started going virtual. So with that, it's been more than 2 years because it was in person and then COVID hit. So was it UMass who sponsored? We started doing a few virtual presentations. And then what we've done now is we're working on, we're looking at other platforms, common platforms where we can post information. I don't know, I don't think it's UMass anymore, but one of the,
Brandeman.
Let me just add something.
Come on up.
Gosh, again.
come on up.
So in regards to your question, one of the partners in the AV stakeholders meetings is Jill Zimmerman from
Okay,
Antelope
yeah,
Valley
there we go,
College.
yes.
And so we know that there is, and that's my hope, is that through Jill, our partners, thank you,
Do it.
our partners at Bakersfield, Antelope Valley College, as you're mentioning, and a couple of other community partners in the educational arena, we are working really hard to make sure that it is also messaged and marketed to prospective students, incoming students, graduates, et cetera, the opportunities for the pipeline into employment in LA County.
Absolutely.
Government jobs, whatever they may be, whether they're entry level at a clerical level or somebody with a degree that wants to pursue social work, there's many opportunities that come with that. And so we do a lot of collaboration, but specifically in terms of your question of us presenting, I think as Frank said, it has been a while, but we meet with Jill on a regular basis to make sure that that word is getting out. And if it's not, then that's something that I know we have a lot of notes about to make sure that there's a formal presentation as well.
Awesome, perfect. I was just about to follow up and ask, would there possibly be able to be a presentation done within the next year that talks about the work that you guys are doing and hiring, just because jobs are a very, very pivotal issue in this community, as I'm sure everyone here is aware. And so we want to start building that pipeline early. But segueing to the next question.
Absolutely.
So this is kind of a multifaceted question, and it centers around something that I think that sometimes we tiptoe around, and that's false reporting. And so my first question in that matter is for parents that can prove false reports have been issued, which has resulted in the removal of a child from the home, what justice and compensation are available for the parents to receive? Additionally, another way of phrasing that question would be, what measures of accountability are issued for those who falsely report due to a young person being in the home? What is the measure for accountability there?
I think that's beyond our scope.
Okay.
I really do. We are charged with responding to allegations, and what you just shared does happen. Unfortunately, it does happen. But that's beyond our scope. Our job is, once a referral is generated, we are mandated by law to go out and assess. And we have met with some parents where referrals have been called out, just horrific things, and we show up and it hasn't happened. And those are some of the referrals that we close out as unfounded.
Okay.
And it's very frustrating because a lot of the parents know who's doing it. A lot of the parents know, or they have a really good idea, but that's beyond the scope of DCFS.
So just to clarify, if a person within the department, such as a worker or what have you, they issue a false report, there is no measure of accountability for that person, or that's just something that can't be
I'm sorry, a
shared with us
social
right
worker?
An employee.
Yes.
yes.
Oh, I apologize. I
think it was both, I think there were both questions
Okay.
there. A
Yes.
false report. Did you mean a
False
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 report like a
reporting
mandate?
from a social worker, yes.
Yeah, I think it would have, this is where management comes in. We would recommend that they communicate with the management, managers, and so let's just say that there's a parent who you're speaking to that actually has a social worker in Torrance. We spoke about Torrance earlier. And the parent says this is not true. They have a couple avenues. One is they have an assigned attorney. If there's an open case, the attorney has a legal ability to ask the hearing officer, AKA judge, to contest the matter and to bring the social worker to the courtroom. With respect to non-court or court as well, they can communicate with the management for the offices. And we are your liaison today, and we can certainly do that as well. But we don't have authority over other office staff, but we have our colleagues at the other offices can certainly look into that.
And you were mentioning other avenues. I heard one. Were there any other avenues for which a parent is able to advocate for themselves in those spaces?
Sure. So first of all, we do have an ombudsman's office, and we can get you that information, and you could always levy, or a person could always levy any kind of an inquiry or complaint.
Okay.
There is a grievance process, and there is actually a form that they can get off of the website, or again, we could forward that to you. And then in addition, they could make any kind of an inquiry to the board in which area is serviced by one of the Board of Supervisors. And so those, while those are brought down to the individual offices to look at respectively, those are all different avenues that can address a complaint, inquiry, concern by anybody. Actually, anybody in the community has those same rights to use those avenues if there's a concern.
Okay, awesome. And I don't want to drill down on this point too much, but if a person has exhausted all of those options, is there anything else additional that they can do, or is that pretty much the scope of the action that can be taken on behalf of the parent advocating for themselves?
So let me say one thing, and I'm going to let Frank address, anything else he wants to add. If a complaint was brought to my attention about a staff member, if I looked into the matter and whatever the outcome may or may not be, the findings that I may make would be internal only, because then you're dealing with a personnel issue.
Absolutely.
So it could be that a matter is addressed internally, but I would not be able to report other than to say that I'm addressing the matter.
Okay.
Because when we're getting into personnel, we're getting into a whole nother kind of area. But specifically with your question, I don't know if Frank has other thoughts about how something is elevated, if it needs to be.
I think at that point, it really is up to the individual parent to possibly seek out, legal remedy.
Okay.
But the board, as Lisa stated, the Board of Supervisors, they're really good at communicating with us and sharing what has been reported. And then it's on record because they send something to us in writing, not a phone call. They'll send us an email saying, look, you need to look into this, and we will. Unfortunately, as Lisa just shared, we may take action against the staff if they have been unethical or done something inappropriate, but we can't share, and that's very frustrating for parents. Because then they'll be like, oh, you didn't even do anything, you covered it all up.
Absolutely,
But we
yes.
can't share, and that's really, that's very difficult.
Okay, that was kind of like where my last question was leading towards, just like what measures of accountability, like within the department itself, are kind of like the procedures for people that issue like false reports. But you kind of touched on that, so I won't hammer down on that too much. But we know that this, being honest, is just like very much an issue in this community, unfortunately, in more so than in other areas of the county. And so I just wanted to make sure that we were trying to make sure that we were advocating for those parents and whatnot who have came to us with issues of this system so that we can collaborate and move forward on other ways to remedy those injustices. So those are all of my questions. Y'all's endurance has been amazing, so thank you so much for that.
No,
But I know
seriously,
that we have.
this was very important, a very important conversation. We appreciate you guys coming, and I'm glad you guys were the only ones on the agenda because literally. But this partnership is gonna. I don't know if we could take action, but this partnership is gonna continue. And if we have to make a subcommittee on this commission for you guys specifically, we will do so. And we want to continue this partnership in the future. This is too important for us not to take the time and talk about this tonight. So I appreciate you. It's good to see the two of you again.
Thank
and it's
you.
good to meet you, Mr. Ramos. And if you could, we have your information. So if you want to stick around, you can. But if not, I'm going to give you a call. So
Excellent, excellent. We appreciate you,
Thank you.
allowing us to be candid, allowing us to really just reach out to all of you, because no matter how many efforts we make, the reality is there are always going to be challenges to facilitating effective and appropriate services for our community. I mean, that's the bottom line. But there are people that have authority to enact change, and you all represent that, and in our field, we represent that.
Right.
So I think together we could really come up with some really good strategies.
Absolutely. Thank you both.
Thank
Okay.
you for having
Our
us.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for being patient, David. Come on.
Okay.
You're good. Are you done?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Oh,
We're
I'm
gonna
sorry.
take public comment now.
I'm in your space.
Sorry.
I apologize.
Thanks for waiting, David.
Very informative. Thank you, Chair and Commission. My name is David Paul. My first job after the Army in 1975 was as a mental health technician for the state of Illinois, working with developmentally disabled people. Later on, I went to a place called Maryville Academy in Des Plaines, Illinois, a Catholic orphanage that was founded 100 years before that, run by Dr. Smith, the pastor. He got an accommodation from then President Ronald Reagan for the Paulina House, and it was a facility for terribly sexually abused children that I was sent to work at because they could not find a white male for the staffing demographic that would go into that neighborhood. So I shifted from a family teacher with at-risk youth who were one step away from prison, and basically I was a counselor, a coach, a mentor, a ass whooper at night, whatever it took for these young men in the unit. I have a cup on my desk from a girl named Bridget. She was 9 years old. When she was 7 years old, her and her younger brother were sold into prostitution by their mother, dragged into a sewer in Chicago, and repeatedly raped by men for 3 days until she gnawed her way through the ropes, got up out of that sewer and was boarded a CTA bus and got help. She gave me that cup because I was able to connect with her after that abuse. She wouldn't look at you. It took quite a while. And I know how hard and difficult that kind of work is. And I have to tell you, when I appreciate you guys. When I was the chair of the problem-solving subcommittee before the pandemic for the AV Homeless Coalition, we were trying to get those numbers of how many foster youth are going to be put back on the streets, and we couldn't get the number, so I appreciate that. But I just want you to know that, Giovanni, 12 years ago, a neighbor who had a dispute with me called DCFS and told them I chained my children in the yard and I was starving them. When a social worker got there, they realized that this was totally crap. But I tell you what I learned is there is no legal way that I can find out because of state law who made that report, and that has never been corrected. So that is my experience with dealing with all of these issues, and I'm glad I got to come here tonight, and I will help you guys however I can in whatever way. I'll stick around after this and we can talk, but I've been a martial arts instructor most of my life and have a way of helping people learn self-discipline, and I helped this commission celebrate our first annual Juneteenth because I believe that history and culture and our country is for everybody, and yes, race is an issue and discrimination exists. There's no doubt about that, but we all have to work to rectify it from a place of knowledge. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you, David.
And we'll keep working at it.
Yes, we will.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks for being here, David. The consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting? CC1.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
A second.
It's been seconded.
Okay,
Let's
we're
vote.
gonna do a roll call vote.
Please.
Commissioners Carter,
Aye.
Davis.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I'm just doing a roll call vote, so you can just say that you agree, or if you'd like to
Aye.
abstain. Thank you. Deloche,
Aye.
Vice Chair Kristen Pope,
Aye.
Chairman Cannon.
Aye.
It passes unanimously.
Thank you. Now it's time to hear public business from the floor.
This is a time to address the Lancaster Social Equity Commission on non-agendized matters. Speaker cards can be found on the back table of the council chambers. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each unless a different time limit is announced. State law prohibits the commission from taking action on items not listed on the agenda. Thank you. There are no speaker cards.
Thank you. So, commissioner comments. Are there any comments from the commission?
I just have one, just very, very quick one. So as we head into the new year, I know that we are almost at December, and so usually this time of year is seen as a time of reflection. And so I just really want to challenge all of the commissioners when we come back and reconvene for our December commission meeting. I really want them to think about all of the challenges that our city is facing, and the scope of which the Social Equity Commission can handle and work to rectify those challenges. And I would really appreciate it if each commissioner could come up with one item that they see in the city, one problem that they want to solve, so that we can work to solve and rectify those challenges come January. Because as the new year approaches, I really want to get more specific in the scope of the problems and the challenges that we handle. So like I said, if just each commissioner could come back with just one item or one problem that they want to see fixed within the city, so that we can work to rectify that, I would greatly appreciate that. And then we can read off the list of those at our December meeting, right before we go off and celebrate the holidays.
Thank you. I would echo those sentiments. I actually have an item that I'd like to talk about, but you know, I would also like to, in that same spirit, I would like to meet in a conference or a study session before our December meeting, so that our study session is still a public meeting, but instead of a dais public meeting, it's like a conference, like a committee's conference.
Like a workshop.
A workshop, yes, a working meeting. And so everybody has gotten one of these. This is something that I have outlined and that I'm hoping to talk about more in depth at that study session with all of you and with our sheriff's department, and hopefully we can get our CHP in there as well. So we all know that there's something happening. There's something going on when you pick up the newspaper and we're seeing so many of our peers that are victims of collisions, that are victims of, everything from reckless driving to DUIs, whether they were behind the wheel during the DUI or they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I personally lost friends of mine. It may not have been in this community, but it is a countywide and a statewide problem. So I came up with something. I talked to some folks. I sat down and talked with some nonprofits in the community, and we saw that, you know what? We don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There could be a public safety campaign where we talk about what it means to be safe while driving. And you know what? It starts with just snapping your seatbelt. But there's a little bit more to it. So what does just snap it mean? Snap it is an acronym. So the S is for safety. Literally, just put on your seatbelt. Stuff like go the speed limit, drive per the weather. I cannot see that. To save my life. And I'm sorry, I was a little bit cheap with the print, so you probably can't see the black and white either. But it'll look better. But drive per the weather. If it's raining outside and we got 55-mile-an-hour speed limits, maybe you should go about 45, even though the speed limit is 55. Watch for hazards and for pedestrians. We have construction all over the city, and there was a new law that was just passed at the state level that says folks can just jaywalk. And so we got to let people know that and be aware of that. The N in SNAP, you need a ride? Something as simple as, do you need a ride? If you see your friend or you see your neighbor and you're leaving a party or you're leaving the club or you're leaving a bar, you need a ride? Let me get you an Uber. Let me drive you home. You don't look like you're good enough to drive. Let me take your keys. Do you need a ride? And then the A, act. You got to take action. Do you see something, say something? Again, I'm going to take your keys. I'm not going to get in that car. You've been drinking. You've been smoking. If I see somebody swerving, I'm going to say something. If I know we all leaving this party drunk, then I'm going to say something. Nobody wants to be that friend that has to tell their family member that I went to the party with Susan and Susan didn't come home. Or me and Susan drove this place and Susan didn't come home. Or I drove Sean somewhere and Sean didn't come home. Nobody wants to do that. And this is not pretty much A specific, but I'm going to get to a reason why I'm speaking in it as a term as one of the target areas for this being youth. Peer pressure. And we had a conversation about that one, right? Should we use peer pressure or peer encouragement? And this is just a proposal for me. When we get into the study session, we could really hash this out. But I'd like to talk about the difference between peer encouragement and peer pressure. Peer encouragement is, all right, see you later, drive safe. That's peer encouragement. We need something more. We need peer pressure. If we can get one person in a group of friends to say it's not cool, I don't want to race. It's not cool. I don't want to do that. We can get one person in a group of friends to be like, why do you think that's cool? You gonna do a donut while I'm in your front seat and try to impress me? That ain't cool. Because I promise you, if a girl tell me that, I'm gonna get it together. But these are things that sound like they're simple, but it's not just about education. It's about stigmatizing dangerous vehicular activities. And when I talk about why we should target it towards a younger generation, the generation that's coming up, they're the folks that's gonna cancel something. They're the folks that's gonna stigmatize it. And they're also the folks that are losing friends and that are coming to school to empty chairs because somebody was trying to impress somebody. And that's what's happening. And I actually worked with a local nonprofit, Soul of the Community, to talk about these things. If you guys don't know about Soul of the Community, it's a nonprofit ran by a local community member named Nashawn Mitchell. And her daughter's name was Soul. And we lost Soul to a collision. Up and coming, somebody that would have probably sat up here with us. And so this is something that I think that we can do, something that I think that with the partnership with the public safety, the sheriff's department, CHP, that we can really make something happen. If we can go to the next slide, please. Why? Again, too often our deputies are responding to traffic collisions that simply could have been avoided. Too often we are picking up the newspaper, we're seeing in the news, or we're hearing on the street that those fatalities are people under 30. And it's not always just people under 30. But we're hearing it too often that it's people under 30. This campaign will facilitate a community response to stigmatize and end street racing, DUIs, and reckless driving, especially amongst young people. If we can go to the next slide. This is easy. How do we roll this out? We have a panel right here of folks that are already committed to doing this. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel because the city has already done something similar with the CNBC campaign. I mean, we don't have to paint everything that say just snap it, but if we can get some wristbands, if we can get the schools, if we can create something that the school system would want to give to their kids, if we can create something that our local leaders would sign on to and be like, you know what, I want to do something about this. Red Ribbon Week, Tom Lackey had the Red Ribbon Week little certificates, and my kids all the way from 7 to 18 from elementary to high school had those. And some of those kids don't even know what drugs is, but you know. But this is something that we don't have to really reinvent the wheel on, but it's something I think we should talk about. And if you can go to the next slide, please, there are some next steps. Again, schedule a study session. I would like to invite the sheriff's station, CHP, and obviously it's a public meeting, so if the community wants to come and share their ideas with us so that we can bounce ideas off of you and you can give us insight and we can give you insight. I appreciate Captain John for speaking with me about this and giving me insight on this. Let's develop a plan together with all of the partners. Let's review that plan. And then when the time is right, let's get it before the city council and say, this is what the issue is. This is what our plan is. This is who our partners are. This is something that we can do. And if we can get there is one person in every friend group that needs a playbook, that is tired of seeing young people do stupid stuff that ends up taking people's lives. And we can turn that peer pressure around We have a whole group of, I mean, you were here when the young lady came and talked about fentanyl, Isabel Rojas, 13 years old. And now the city's gonna do an Isabel Rojas project to do an education about fentanyl, how to use Narcan, where you can get Narcan. Because a 13-year-old came up here and said, I'm tired of hearing about fentanyl poisonings in my community. If we can get one Isabel Rojas in every friend group to say, just snap it, I think we'd have done something very significant about what's going on in our city. And that's it. Thank you. Is there any other comments from the commission? Let's schedule a study session, hopefully before the end of this month. I don't want to get too close to the holiday. If it has to be after Thanksgiving, so be it. And I understand that there's
Thank you, because
availabilities.
after finals.
Oh yeah, I forgot he was. I forgot about finals. Oh Jesus. I'm way too busy. Okay. And if I understand the schedules and things go into that, so if you guys could all work with us in doing that, and I know our assistant city clerk is just one woman, so individually, I'll do my part as well to reach out to everybody, especially on the commission, Captain John, to see what availabilities are like for the rest of this month. And if we have to do it after finals, we have to do it after finals. That's fine. City council only has one meeting in December, if I'm correct. So we got a little wiggle room in December. I'm cold in here. But other than that, if there's nothing else from the commission, I thank everybody for sticking in here with us. I thank the Department of Children and Family Services for coming and giving us insight. Thank you, Dave, for coming. It's always a pleasure to have you. And to our staff, this meeting, the next regular meeting for the Social